Good morning.
Good morning.
I would very much like to start shall we call it a lesson? An experience? So that we may have a more practical unfoldment of this message in our lives. This is undoubtedly the first time in the entire Western world that so many have been interested, seriously interested, in a mystical message. When I say so many, do not misunderstand me that I mean tremendous numbers, but I mean tremendous numbers for a message of this nature. There are probably 60,000 homes in the world in which this message is seriously read, but there are probably only 10,000 students in the world who seriously study it. And then how many there are who actually practice it is something I have no way of knowing. But even this number is really sufficient not only to assure that we who are united in serious study will bring forth a wonderful experience of this life, but that we will make a tremendous contribution to the entire world. What determines the nature and the extent of our contribution to the world depends on the extent of our own individual demonstration. I do not often like to speak of my own experience, as you so well know, but once in a while it is necessary in order to illustrate a point. For many, many, many years, I had absolutely no interest in you, in any you, anywhere in the world. None whatsoever. I had only one interest in life, and that was the discovering of the secret of why God is not in the human universe, and how God may be brought into the human universe, more especially into my experience. I was interested in the world academically, but not with any thought that this would actually help the world. Therefore, the goal was to seek something for myself, to seek if God could be brought into my personal experience. I was living the same human life that everyone else lives on earth, nearly everyone, and it wasn't satisfactory. Even with some of its successes, it wasn't satisfactory. And therefore, there was this drive to find, can God be brought into my experience so that something of a different nature could take place? What, of course, I would have no way of knowing. And therefore, my experience for years and years and years had nothing to do with you, had nothing to do with the world. It had only to do with my seeking, my search and my goal. It was only after the spiritual experience that my life began to be lived out into the world, and then not because I choose it that way, but because it was an impelling thing from within. And so it is that every student must make up his mind or her mind that until I actually attain the God experience, I must not think in terms of benefiting the world. I must not think in terms of blessing the world, because spiritually I have nothing with which to bless them. And I might as well acknowledge it. Until I have the God experience, I have nothing spiritually for the world. I may be able to contribute financially, I may be able to contribute with inventions or discoveries, but spiritually I have no contribution to make until I have had the God experience. That is, until my life shows some measure of spiritual fruitage. Therefore, the experience of study, meditation, communion, contemplation must take place within me until I receive the signal to go further. To bring this experience about, or in the experience of those who have had it, in order to deepen it and enrich it, there must be a prolonged period of study, meditation, communion, contemplation, until the flow begins from within and becomes evident without. It is for this reason that I would like very much to have a few lessons, a few experiences together, to that end. The revelation that eventually was given to me, and which we in the Message of the Infinite Way are now trying to demonstrate, is this. First, that I and my Father are one. This is not an original revelation. There are no original revelations. When the revelation first came to me, I thought I was the only person who knew it, and probably the only one who had discovered it. But since then, I have acquired a very large library. And I can assure you that there isn't anything that I'm going to say ever that is an original revelation. It wasn't even original with Jesus Christ when he said, I and the Father are one, because 500 years before, Buddha had been teaching that there is only one ego, one self, one life, one mind, and I am that. And long before that, it was revealed through Krishna and others, the same truth. As a matter of fact, Moses, centuries before Jesus, revealed, I am that I am. There is only one. So there is nothing original about any discovery, but there is something original about a mode of practice. And that is what we are dealing with. I and my Father are one is the revelation, the premise, the conclusion, and it is that which we are to show forth. We are to show forth in our daily living that I and my Father are one, and that all that the Father hath is mine. Not to hug to myself, but to share. So, in your contemplation, start with this: I and my Father are one. All that the Father hath is mine. And now let us see how to bring this forth. And to do this, we will take this statement: I have meat the world knows not of. Now remember, our eyes are closed, the world is shut out from us. I am alone inside of my own being, and at the moment not even aware that there is another within me, that inner greater part of myself. I and my Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. But at this moment I'm only aware of I, myself, and I'm not aware of the greater part of myself, the Father within. This is the invisible part of myself. This is the storehouse of my good. And it is this that I am seeking conscious communion with. I have meat the world knows not of. Yes? If I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine, and the Father is invisible, and the Father is closer to me than breathing, then I have within me meat the world knows not of. Meat. How shall we use that word meat? We will use it as a spiritual word signifying grace. I have a power of grace within me. Security, safety, peace, source of health, source of abundance, source of love. This is what we mean by meat. I have within me that the world cannot see and therefore cannot deprive me of. I have the source of infinity within me, the source of intelligence, the source of wisdom, the source of love. Notice that word source that came in. I have within me the source of the cement of human relationships, love, the source of life, the source of harmony, the source of peace, the source of understanding. This is what we mean by meat, spiritual meat. Well, the Master also used the word bread. I am the bread of life. And so we can use the word bread in the same way that we do meat, food, food. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word oh, this gives us a whole new meaning. I have the Word of God within me that the world knows not of. I have within me the Word, the bread, the source, the food of life, the substance of life. It's all spiritual. We're not referring in any wise at all to anything of a material nature. All of this, the meat, the bread, the Word, this is all spiritual, and it is the source of my outer supply of peace, safety, security, health, joy, abundance, sharing, companionships, friendships, family. I have the source of this, the substance of this, and the world knows it not. And I have it. Now think of this for a minute, the word have, because perhaps in your orthodox religious life, or later in your metaphysical life, you have made efforts through God, or through metaphysics, or through treatment, to get. And now you see why you must inevitably have failed. There is nothing left for you to get, since I and the Father are one. And all that the Father hath is mine, and I have meat, and I am the bread. Therefore, every time that I have looked either to God or to truth, to prayer or to treatment for something, I have set up the very barrier that kept it from me, because I and my Father are one. That which I am seeking, I am. I embody, I embrace within myself all that the Father hath is mine. And what has the Father? What is the Father? The source, the substance, the creative principle of all that is. And all of this is embodied within my very being. I have meat the world knows not of. I am the bread of life. And this source is come that I might have life, and that I might have it more abundantly, and it is established as my very identity. Here, where I am, within me, is the source of all I may ever hope for, long for, desire, or need. All of this is established within me because it is my Father's good pleasure to give me the kingdom. When? Not tomorrow. God can do nothing tomorrow. All that God is now. Even the law that causes the sun to rise tomorrow is a law of God that is operating now. If it weren't for the nowness of the operation of the law of God, the sun could not rise tomorrow, for God could not start tomorrow to make it rise. If the seeds that are in the ground now, which are to become fruit and vegetables months from now, and flowers, if it were not that the law of God is now operating, they could not appear in their season. Therefore, there is no God to operate in the future. The operation of God is in the nowness, even though the fruitage may appear in its season. There are some trees that blossom in spring and summer, and some trees that only blossom in the fall, bear fruit in the fall. All of this is in God's season, but it is because of the nowness of God. God does not make the snow to fall in the winter time. It is the operation of God throughout the year that produces snow in its due season. And so we must learn that regardless of the fruitage that is to appear in my life tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, the law that sets it in motion is my knowing the truth of God's nowness and withinness. I must know the truth that the source of my supply of love, life, health, harmony, wholeness, protection, safety, security, is not outside of me, it is within me, but my recognition of this produces it in the without, in God's season. I must not look at any temporary barrenness of mine and judge my lacks or limitations. I must look at this barrenness with the understanding that God's law is operating within me. I am come that I might have life and that I might have it more abundantly. And therefore, in its due season, in place of barrenness or the appearance of barrenness, there will be fulfillment. There is no real barrenness. Every once in a while we strip our coconut trees of coconuts, and then if we look at them the next day and judge by appearances, we would judge barrenness. But there is no barrenness there. In the withinness of that tree, the process is now taking place that will produce more coconuts in due season. Therefore, judge not after appearances. In any experience of immediate lack or limitation, in any facet of our experience, let us realize that this is not a period of barrenness, but the period of realization of the operation of God, the continuity of God's grace, the isness of God, the isness and the withinness of God, so that what is taking place in my consciousness at this moment, my realization at this moment of the withinness of God's grace, God's law, the withinness of the source of all that is. Remember, that this activity of truth in my consciousness at this moment is the assurance of some form of good to appear in my outer experience. Today, tonight, tomorrow, next week, next year. Because I know, I am knowing, I am bearing witness that right now within me the grace of God is functioning, because I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine, and it is God's pleasure to give me the kingdom. Therefore his spiritual love is fulfilling me. His spiritual grace is guiding and directing me. His spiritual grace is the meat and the wine and the water within me. And you see, this is called, mystically, living the life of prayer, living the life of contemplation, the contemplative life. It is also called communion. I am communing with the Spirit within me. But at this moment, I, Joel, am playing the major part in the communion. It is as if I were priming the pump by these reminders of truth, remembrances of truth, statements of truth. But then, with this understanding established in me, each day I come to the second part of the contemplative life, the part of communion, in which I now turn within, Father, speak. Thy servant heareth. Now I'm listening for thy voice. And then it is in this part of the meditation, contemplation, in which we take the listening attitude. We stop all thoughts, and listen. It is all right if you start this with a half of a second or a full second. It is sufficient. Because if you have enough of these periods and come to this moment of listening, even though it can last only a half a second or a second, you will find that eventually, of its own accord, it will stretch itself out into 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and ultimately a whole minute. No one needs any more than that. There will be occasions when, for some special reason, we may be enabled to be in that listening attitude for minutes and minutes and minutes. But that is because God has created the occasion, and God has made it possible for us to relax for that length of time in order to fulfill whatever it is that God is imparting to us. But ordinarily speaking, anyone that can be still and listen for 1 minute and can repeat this at will as many times a day as they wish will find that they have been fulfilled, that their life begins to take on an entirely different nature. Now, This doesn't mean that right from the beginning your life is going to take on the nature of sitting on cloud nine and everything is going to be harmony and peace and love, because this is not true. I would be misleading you if I gave you any such promise or assurance, because the Master did not hesitate to say, I am come to not to bring peace, but a sword. I am not come to bring peace to you, but a sword. And by this he meant eventually we are not going to know human good at all, nor experience it. Our good is of a spiritual nature, an entirely different nature than just having a doubled income, or a perfect heart, or even a perfect body. No, in the beginning of our experience, it is true that our health improves, our sense of supply improves. It isn't always that our income increases. It is that a lot of the money that we have spent for unnecessary or foolish or wasteful things is no longer spent that way, and we do have more money available for the real necessary things of human experience. In other words, less of our money goes into waste products and more of it into the good things. Now, we do find an improved health, improved supply, in some ways improved human relationships. But it is likewise true that we lose a great many of our friends, and we lose some of the members of our family, because we cannot expect, because God has opened us to this way of life, that it likewise will open them. And if they will not be open to it, gradually there will be a falling away. And that is a period for many people that is unpleasant, very unpleasant, because humanly we love our friends, we love our relatives, but when our way of life is no longer their way of life, there does come a separation. And this is one of the ways, well, the Master described it, unless you're willing to leave mother, brother, sister, father, for my sake. And it doesn't mean desert them, but it does mean a difference in relationship. Then in the same way, humanly, we have built up ideas as to how our supply should come, or where we would like to live, or what we would like to do. But once the Spirit of God begins to take hold of us, it begins to work out its plan in us. It does not work to fulfill our plan or our desires. And if anyone thinks that God is for the purpose of serving our human will, they will soon learn through this work that it is not true. God is not meant to fulfill our human desires. Man was created to show forth God's will, God's plan, God's life. Now, humanly, the race is not doing that. That is why the race is at war with itself. That is why the race is at war with each other, because it is set on fulfilling its own desires, its own will, its own way. And of course, there is no God's grace in that experience to bring to fruition. Spiritual fruition can only come as we surrender our will, our desire, and in these periods of meditation, be very sure, thy will be done in me. I am not trying to tell God how I want my life lived or what I want God to do. I am submitting myself in meditation to God's will, God's way, God's plan, that I may be an instrument through which God's plan on earth may be fulfilled. If that means eventually giving up my business, that's the way it has to be. If that means eventually living some other place, that is the way it has to be. I am not going to move. I am not going to give up anything. I am submitting myself to God to let God move me as God will. I was not placed on earth for any other reason than to be an instrument through which God's grace and God's will and God's plan might be fulfilled on earth. But humanly, we are not doing this. And it is for this reason that we are now returning to the Father's house. We have been prodigals with a will of our own, a desire of our own, a hope of our own. We are returning to our Father's house. Nevertheless, Father, not my will be done, but thy will be done through me. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, but, Son, all that I have is thine for sharing. For we are all children of the one Father. We are all brothers and sisters in Christ, of the household of God. And what belongs to one of us belongs to all of us, not through any communistic system of dividing, but through the spiritual system of multiplying. There is no need to divide. The Master taught us the law of spiritual multiplication, not division. At no time in his ministry did he divide. Always he brought forth multiplication of the loaves and of the fishes, and so do we. And so do we. We share, but not from any system of believing that what is humanly mine is thine, but from the spiritual grace of love. Through love we share with each other, but only because we know the law of multiplication that never ends. See now how, again close your eyes, and see how it is that within you is this kingdom of God. Within your consciousness is the activity of the grace of God, functioning 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The grace of God is functioning within you to renew, to multiply, to rebuild even the lost years of the locust. But don't look outside of you. As your eyes are closed, look within you and realize here within me, closer than breathing, within my very own consciousness, the grace of God is operating to fulfill God's abundance, to fulfill the infinity of God in me and through me, that I may take the 12 baskets full and share them. Here within me now, the law of God, the grace of God, which is to appear as coconuts next month on my trees, which is to appear as flowers on my bushes, which is to appear as birds singing in my garden, which is to appear as 12 baskets full of substance and supply for me to share with my neighbors, those who have not yet realized that the law of multiplication is at work within them, not outside. The law of multiplication is working within you, within me, here and now and forever. And my contemplation of this truth is what sets it in motion and keeps it in motion. As long as I am obedient, that when it appears, that I likewise share. During December, our household was just filled with mail from all parts of the world, with love, greetings, gratitude in every possible form. But you see, if I do not immediately place that on the throne of God and then share it with you, and through you, through these tapes to the world, it would dam itself up. No more could come in, and no more would go out. And so it is that as I have freely received of love, joy, gratitude, grace, so in this form must I share it, and other forms. But the main point first is, remember that it is in your periods of daily contemplation of these truths that this law, which has been operating in you since before Abraham was, is enabled to come forth into expression. The world lost it through having lost the practice of silent prayer, meditation, communion, contemplation. If you live out here constantly in this world, you set up a sense of separation from the source. Because remember, the source is within me. I have meat the world knows not of. I have the infinity of meat and bread and wine and water, but it can only come into manifestation through an activity of consciousness. What does not take place in your consciousness will never take place in your world. If you do not have love for God and man, fulfilling the 2 commandments, in your consciousness, you will not find God's love or man's love flowing to you. First, it must be an activity of your consciousness before it can flow from you and to you. In the same way, if you do not have, quote, if you do not abide in the Word and let the Word abide in you. This is meditation. This is contemplation. This is communion. Abide in the Word. Let the Word abide in you. What Word? Me. Let me. If you do not let me abide in you. Me is I. I have meat the world knows not of. I have within me the meat and wine and water. I have within me the power of resurrection, and if you destroy this temple, whether it's my health, my body, my home, my family, my anything, all these are temples. If you destroy any of these temples, my contemplation with the Spirit of God within me will raise it up again. If only we understood the story of Job. Job, who lost everything and tried all of the known ways in the Hebrew religion to have them restored, and they weren't. And in the end, he discovered a secret. I have rediscovered it. Whatever has been lost, or ever may be lost, out of my experience, I know the way to resurrect it and it is the way of contemplation, communion. It is the message of the Christ, more especially as revealed in the Gospel of John, the message that refers to the I that is within me, the Father within me, He that is greater than I. In one of our lessons, somewhere or other, I have referred to this as to an iceberg. 1/3 that shows above and 2/3 that is hidden beneath. And so it is that when we look in the mirror, we see only the 1/3 of us, because the 2/3 is invisible. The 2/3 of us that is hidden is the Father within me. The I that in reality I am. The I that has come within me, that I may have life and that I may have it more abundantly. Now, if you will think of the law of nature that operates in the trees and the plants, so that even when you see the barren soil or the barren trees or the barren bushes, you can smile to yourself and say, no, I know better. There is a law operating within that in due season will bring fruitage to the without. If you can do that, you will have a cue to this entire subject of contemplation and meditation. If you can look behind the universe and see that a law, a spiritual law, an invisible law, an incorporeal law is operating and appearing outwardly as the movement of the earth, the planets, the stars, the suns, the moons, the tides. If you can see this, that all of this that is in the visible world is functioned by an invisible, you will begin to perceive the nature of the contemplative life, the fruitfulness of the life that is lived in prayer, meditation, realization. Because as you witness those things, you can come back to yourself and understand the message of Jesus Christ. He that is within me is greater than he that is in the world. He performeth that which is given me to do. The Father within me doeth the works. I of my own self could never do them. The Father within me. And then you will know that contemplation is the way. Meditation. Communion. Living, moving, having your being in the realization of your inner self, which is the great 2/3 of you, the source of the other third, without which there would be no other third. You see, in the human world, people believe that they had a beginning with their mother and father. Why, they've lost the whole secret of the Master's teaching. Call no man on earth your mother or your father. There is but one parent, and that is the Creator, the creative principle of us. That which is responsible for us may even have been responsible for our mother and father having come together. But above all things, we know God is responsible for our being here. Therefore, God has planted the seed of himself within us. We call this the Christ, or we call it the I of myself, the self of me. But the secret I have learned through the infinite way is that the greatest word of all is consciousness. Unless I am conscious of these truths, they do not manifest. Unless I am conscious of the truth of being, consciously aware, unless I consciously abide in God and God in me, unless I consciously know this truth, unless I consciously hear the still small voice, unless I consciously subject myself to the law of God and the will of God, none of this happens, and then I'm just a member of the human race. And this isn't enough, because we have a divine heritage, a spiritual heritage. Know ye not? Ye are the children of God. Know ye not that your body is the temple of God? Do you not realize that your consciousness really is God, and that when you are in meditation, you are receptive and responsive to the presence and the power of God that is the activity of your consciousness? Yes, it is not a lazy life. It is a joyous one when we have really learned contemplation and meditation. And for quite a while, it may bring disturbing influences into our experience. It may even bring up latent illnesses in our body, so that we may have the opportunity of experiencing a spiritual healing, and thereby leaving the body purified, with no latent diseases or latent signs of age to come forth from them. All of this has to be done consciously, no other way. Thank you.